Welcome to this panel. Thank you all for joining us this Monday morning. The real value of relationships. I've been looking forward to this topic. It's a topic that's deep in my heart. I value and I put so much emphasis on relationships because over the years I've realized that it is the most important thing. Everything else is actually secondary. So we will go into the sharing. But first of all, I would like to introduce myself. Those who don't know, I'm founder of Golden Door. And if you see this picture of this book, half shown, the Golden Truths book. The Golden Truths book is as a compiling author, and we have two contributing authors here with me of various chapters related to relationships. And this book is part of a series to support the new Golden Truths Foundation to raise awareness on truth writing, to write courageously. So very proud of this landmark, this time when we launched this series, and also at the same time, the Golden Door 2021. This is the second year running. During a pandemic, we launched during a pandemic. We launched we were inaugurated in 2020. And we changed from a physical event to a virtual event. We never expected it, So when the pandemic hit, was it February when we had the lockdowns, and the March was supposed to be the event. I thought, oh my goodness, this is a test for us also. But we made it, and Golden Door is thriving. We have such a great community, and we have members of the community here also with us. So I will start and introduce Dr. Kent, who is now in Tennessee, USA, Sunday night. Okay. Sunday night, yes. So Dr. Kent van Cleave, an educator, lives with his wife in Tennessee, surrounded by the forests and the mountains. You are a great nature lover. He earned his PhD in industrial and organizational psychology, and for the last 33 years, he's been a professor of psychology and business, as well as a business consultant. Okay, and I also have with me Deepak Natverlal, based in Singapore. I've known Deepak for a long, long time. I think it's been 20 years now. Yes, 20.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
And Deepak is a lawyer and barrister at law from Lincoln's Inn of Court, LLM, University of London. He is currently practicing in his own boutique law firm. He's also an adjunct lecturer at a local tertiary institutions. He writes articles that are inspired by events on daily life. He enjoys music, poetry, counseling, and meditation. I don't call Deepak a lawyer. He's a counselor. He's another level of lawyer. He's an example of what lawyers should be. Okay. And
very kind of you.
Oh, it's true. It's absolutely true. Next, I have with me Norani from Malaysia, now in Singapore. We have just recently met, but I've been really so impressed by her. And she was recommended by someone I've been collaborating with, Andrew Chua of Authentic Business. I'm so impressed by her passion, by her courage, and what she's gone through, and she's willing to stand firm in her beliefs and in achieving what she feels that is important in her life, higher purpose. She's an advocate for intercultural engagement. She has trained hundreds of youth. She's focused on the youth in building harmonious relationships. She has also lived among the unsheltered and the differently abled youth in Shanghai, refugees in Malaysia. And the projects she has led were winners and finalists for Expatriate Professional Women's Society Shanghai Award and the President Challenge Award, Social Enterprise of Singapore. So quite a number of accomplishments. And last but not least, Elias Canaris, based in New Zealand. Which part of New Zealand are you?
I'm based up in Auckland.
Auckland, okay. So Elias, in fact, he just released a groundbreaking book I'll let him share about it. He's a keynote speaker and author of the book, Learning from the Stop. He focuses on helping leaders lead. And as the president of the Global Speakers Federation, he understands how to lead diverse and high-performing teams that straddle multiple geographies. A prolific speaker in over 13 countries across 4 continents. He uses humor to help his audience engage with the message. Good. Okay, great. So what we're going to do now is that just to allow the conversation to flow naturally, I'm going to invite Kent, who is a contributing author for book 1, to read an excerpt of the chapter which he wrote, which is entitled Reconciliation. So I hand it over to you, Ken. You've got up to 5 minutes, 3 minutes, up to you, what you'd like to read.
All right. I'm just going to start at the top of this thing. It's a fairly powerful story, I think. A few years ago in a correspondence course I used to teach for the University of Tennessee, I had a most unusual student. He had been convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to death. The crime for which he was convicted was a murder for insurance. A group of men convinced the victim to come fishing with them, knowing he could not swim. Then out on the lake, one of the men simply pushed him off the boat. My student collected the insurance and likely shared it with his accomplices. He was convicted of having been the mastermind and was the only one of the group to receive the death penalty. Despite his precarious situation, he was persisting in getting his bachelor's degree. Perhaps it was, for him, something that he could do to reclaim a sense of redemption. This is a correspondence course. I'm going to go off script for just a second. 20 lessons in the course, and we started corresponding as well as sharing the lessons, first about little things, but then he became increasingly open and he increasingly told me about himself. We established a rapport and continued to correspond for 3 or 4 years after he finished the course. My student told me in bits and pieces about his son, who was about 20 years old and from whom he was estranged. His son was his only remaining family member besides his instructor, his only meaningful connection to the outside world. One day in a social psychology class I was teaching at the University of Tennessee, I mentioned this case as it fit into the topic we were discussing. I mentioned how lonely it must be for this man to be on death row and for his son not to talk to him or acknowledge his letters. To my surprise, as this class was ending, a girl came up to where I was standing and told me that her boyfriend was this man's son. We talked about the coincidence of her being in my class and then went our ways. This was the last lecture, and the next time we got together was for the final exam. The girl spoke to me again after the exam. She had spoken with her boyfriend about this amazing coincidence. Just a couple of days later, my family and I were leaving to visit my in-laws in Auburn, Alabama for the Christmas holiday. As we pulled down our driveway, the mail delivery woman drove up and put mail in our box. Of course, we retrieved it and took it with us. We hadn't driven more than a mile when I recognized the handwriting on one of the envelopes. It was a letter from my former death row student. Curiously, I opened up the envelope and began reading. The man told me that his son had been back in contact with him thanks to me, and they are reconciled. I still think of that letter as my Christmas miracle. My student persisted in his studies, excelling in all of his classes. He fought through cancer and chemotherapy. He graduated with his bachelor's degree. So what is the message here? One message, the one that immediately comes to mind, is that if you have one of these estrangements in your life, you also have the power to give a great gift. Go to that person or write that person a letter. Put that falling out aside. It does not matter who was wrong or who was right. What matters is that you rise above the hurt and reach out to the other person if it is safe to do that. Estrangement is lose-lose. Reconciliation is win-win. Truly, this reconciliation was a godsend for my former student. He now had someone on the outside who cared about him, a connection to the world at large. But there's another more powerful lesson embedded in this series of events, which is revealed only if you shift perspective off of my former student and onto his son. Imagine growing up, coming of age, entering young adulthood, forming your adult identity around the context of having a convicted murderer on death row for a father. In virtually all human societies, people who commit such egregious crimes are shunned, ostracized, turned into permanent pariahs. The focus in prison is more on punishment than rehabilitation. And should the criminal be released from prison, the community has been conditioned to continue to shun and disapprove. Like it or not, the societal disapproval reflects onto the criminal's family members. From this perspective, it is not difficult to understand why a son would estrange from his murderous father. It is doubly understood if we account for the son's feelings about the crime his father committed. This leads logically to the question, what would it take for such a son to be able to reconcile with his father? The answer to that question is simply forgiveness, but it is not easy. Reconciliation means the son must work through an atlas of feelings and attributions, drawing up each hurt in turn and forgiving his father for that hurt. It requires that the son releases blaming of his father, releases anger towards him, and destroy the negative connection that he has forged with his father.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Kent. It's very
So
tough.
the short statement is, when you forgive, you free a prisoner, and that prisoner is you.
Yes. Yes. Thank you. Deepak.
Yes, if I may. First, I would like to thank everyone for having invited me to come on board and share, especially Tahira and supporting friends like Mr. Dr. Van Cleave and Mr. Elias. I'm just going to start off by saying that the story I wrote is about not only death, but about life. And death is a topic that not many people are comfortable talking about, but it is as much a part of our lives as life itself. So what I will actually begin by saying is some parts of my chapter. Sometimes words are like writings on sea, sand washed away by the rising and wading tides of time. All that remains then are perhaps memories, and even these fade away like specks of dust that are blown away by the winds of change. So what then really matters in the end? What is it that which we all find common that unites us in our darkest hour and which ultimately takes us to the highest heights of humanity? As I hold the pen in a poignant pause at an unearthly hour of the night, I am ruminating about what I could possibly say that would make any more sense than what others have before me already said and done. A question starts flickering in the cauldron of my heart, and memories of a familiar tale of loss and hope come rushing to the fore. A story expressed by many others before me, but which remains a classic example of empathy and which has lessons that remain astoundingly relevant. The story is basically, in a summary, about a lady who is in a good job and she loses her husband in an accident. And she has a son, and her son and she are now basically in grief. And over time, she meets another person in a place in Singapore where they visit a place called Fort Canning Park. And there's a small pond there, and that happens to be the place that they used to go when they were once a complete family. And of course, there the man and this lady find solace in sharing about their pain. And I continue from where I think is of significance. All three of them stood in silence as the water from the fountain flowed. Indeed, death is a 5-letter word that chokes us when the pain from loss seems insurmountable. It is a reality that we can't deny and often consciously reject, but it is a reality we have to face at some point in our lives. Grief tends to be compounded further when the death is not only untimely, but unexpected. No joy can match the elation that comes from celebrating various milestones with them. First words, graduations, 21st birthdays, marriages, birth of grandchildren are all memorable. Conversely, no sorrow can match the grief when a parent leaves before the children arrive at these milestones, especially when it comes abruptly and unexpectedly. Death of this kind often robs us of our dignity, sanity, and meaning. The grieving process takes its emotional, physical, and even spiritual toll on us, and that is exactly when the power of empathy unites us. For it is when we share pain that we know the pain of others. We will never know and fully understand the pain felt by Priya and Dave, these are the two characters in the story, until we go through it. Because pain doesn't have a season. Grief leaves behind the white embers of a burning bereavement that never ceases. In other words, the gaping hole in their hearts can never be completely filled. Their story is a reminder also that empathy has no season. Though we may never have lost someone we love, we can choose to reach out to those who need comfort during their darkest nights. The momentum of hope is in the momentum of movement, moving forward. Through unified empathy, which is love and compassion, the bereaved can find greater strength, enduring hope, and deeper healing. No one knows the path that's ahead of us, but we all can choose to be humane. By reaching out to others through empathy, kindness, and respect, we can be united with them on their journey through grief and loss. In the end, their journey now shall someday become our own. Thank you.
Thank you, Deepak. I was feeling a bit emotional when you were reciting. Okay, so we have we started the Monday morning with a lot of deep feeling. A bit
But at least I'm grateful that we are all in touch with our feelings, because I think, you know, we live in a very desensitized world that we talk about facts, figures, and we need to be in touch with this heart of ours, without which we can't live and make sense of the world.
Okay, so just spoken by a lawyer with a heart.
Yeah.
Okay, that's the joke for today, but it's true. Okay, so it's open to the floor. Would like to pick up on that, or you'd like to? I mean, you know, one thing is for sure. These 2 years, the pandemic years, there's a lot of intense feelings because the things which we are going through in terms of losses, in terms of being away from our loved ones. These two things, you know, we are being tested in all these things. We need to be forgiving because our relationships are being tested. There's an embattlement going on also. Lockdowns, all these things. So reconciliation, forgiveness, empathy, all these are the emotions and feelings that we have to go through. Okay, I leave it to the floor with Elias. Rani, would like to say anything?
Yeah, I like to just follow on what Deepak said. He made a very interesting comment there. As part of what he read out, he said, you can, first of all, he said, empathy has no season, and you can choose to reach out. I think that's so important, especially at this time. And Deepak, thank you for sharing that. Because at this time, as Tahira has said, we're in lockdown. Right now, people that we see around us are concerned. They're living from paycheck to paycheck. They're unsure what the future has to offer. And I'm very blessed living here in New Zealand. We had 170 days of continuous freedom without any COVID detected in the community. But all of a sudden, 4 weeks ago, we had the first case, which mushroomed to about 720 within the short period of a couple of weeks. Yet I have a friend who regularly reaches out. His name is Bill, and he will phone me up just to see how I am. Hey, Elias, Bill here. No need to call me back. Just want to make sure you're okay. And I think this is the time that we need to understand that people around us are sitting there who are either lost, broken, or in pain. And it is up to us to reach out to others and create community, because that's the best thing that we can do in these difficult circumstances.
One of the worst things that happened in the United States during this pandemic is how they had to lock down nursing homes. Elder people who are unable to receive visitors and have only tenuous social contacts with the world. It's like they were put in solitary confinement for a year and a half. And I know of one woman who was mentally sharp at the beginning of the pandemic. She was 97 years old, and she died 6 months ago and had developed dementia.
Wow.
It's like being in a sensory deprivation tank. There are no relationships. Caregivers do not form those relationships because they are self-protecting.
Yeah. So she died in isolation.
She died in isolation, unable to be seen by her son or her grandchildren. Our primary spiritual need is connection. Relationships are a special form of that connection. And we get our meaning and our purpose from our connections. If we don't have those social connections, those relationships, we're like that neuron in the developing 2-year-old brain that hasn't made any meaningful connections with other neurons. What happens with neurons that don't connect in the cortex is that they get pruned out. They get destroyed because they have no meaning and they need room. The brain needs room for myelination. So that to me, I was going to talk about technology and the double-edged sword that is for relationships, but the pandemic issues, I think, trump.
So, Kent, why don't we explore that? You talk about technology. Technology is supposed to be here to help us, to enhance our lives. Yet you raise a very, very good point. Technology will not replace, I don't think, the ability and the need for personal one-on-one relationship. I remember as we were talking about this panel a couple of weeks ago, I raised the memory with us as a team about my experience in the UK back in the mid to late 90s. I was involved with an IT and telecommunication company developing a product called the Personal communication computer, the PCC. This was designed to have a PC at one end, a PC at the other end, a phone, a camera, a bit of hardware and software connected by a phone line. And it was enabling you to have video conferencing calls, share whiteboards. This, as I said, was the early to mid 90s. And I spoke to my boss and I said, can I please be based out of our training center, which was about a 10-kilometer journey from my home, as opposed to having to make the 35 to 40-kilometer journey into town to be in the office? My boss said no. I said, but why not? We've got technology. We can use it to communicate. We can use it to share ideas. He said, Elias, all of the business is done either around the water cooler or over a cup of coffee.
Yes.
That's interesting. Yeah.
Oh,
Deepak, when you were reading just now, you know, I recall this young girl that I met in Kabul in 2018. Her name is Khadija. And myself and two other friends,
Yes.
through this Blue Ribbon Peace Education, we went there, and after knowing this organization called Afghan Peace Volunteers for almost 7 years, at
Yes.
last I got to visit them. And I brought a lot of, you know, gift from other youth in Malaysia, and they wrote many cards. And then I was invited to meet all these kids. They normally roam around the street in Kabul. And so when we were there, sharing about aspiration, one of the girls, Khadija, so that was Khadija, she asked me in Dari, then translated, you talk about hope. Do you think we in Afghanistan have hope? Wow, I didn't know what to answer. And I thought she would just stop there. She said, my mother said, in Afghans, we have no hope. You know, my heart just sank. Because there I was bringing all this, you know, cards and all that. And so for like almost a minute, I couldn't answer her. Then I could pull myself back together and share with her that hope is almost like a dream. We all can have dreams. So I asked them, how many of you had dream last night? So some of them put their hands up. So I said, can I go and snatch the dream that you have in your mind? I said, no. So I said, let's keep hoping together. And often some hopes come to reality, but at least we have that. Now, we all know Afghan situation. And talking about technology, Elias and Dr. Ken, you know, I have so many, all these young refugees from Myanmar that are in Malaysia. They live with me, I live with them, you know, and during the recent coup in Myanmar, technology was the one that kept them together. It's amazing, you know, because the whole network all over the world, for example, for refugees from Myanmar, you know, goes through Messenger, Facebook. That's how powerful it is. The grandma that is staying in a village in Myanmar would have her grandchild or neighbor, young ones that have Facebook, that can connect the son or daughter or the grandchildren in Malaysia, for example, by Messenger, and they can connect their uncle or auntie or whoever relative in another country, in the third and fourth country, and that relationship continues. And here I am, another new person in their life. And I just realized that despite I'm not in this whole direct network, that relationship that they have has blessed me as another new person, whereby I need to make sure that they have data plan, for example. And, you know, like, for example, our friends in Kabul right now, you know, before 31st August, everyone was scrambling. Where should we go? The airport is already closed. How are they going to flee? And all this relationship, though we have never met them in person, became so significant because we had to connect with the international community, whether it's UN, any NGOs, friends abroad in the neighboring countries, on how to help our friends, dear ones in Kabul, for example, or in Myanmar could get support, either financially, the bank is closed. How do we help them financially when all the system is down? And I really realized that relationship means so much, even if we have never met the person face to face, because they are intermediaries, and it's really no season. It's all season. And I still remember Khadija. So thank you, Deepak. You read was so much emotion in it, and I just I just hope I can see Khadija again. And I promise I'll come back to Kabul and find you, and I do hope I'll go back.
Let me say a few words. I speak from the heart, and I can tell you that we are here we are all beacons in our own way. We are all beacons in everyone's lives. We may not recognize it, but we are always emitting a very powerful message by our words, actions, and our thoughts. And relationships are basically all about that. We are connecting as much as we are connecting with technology, through technology. But we are basically communicating from heart to heart. And I find that if you are sincere, genuine concern for the others' welfare and the others' being, you will actually always have that connection. So forgiveness, kindness, respect, all forms of empathy comes from compassion. Basically, we are actually concerned for them. And I know the universe is such a place where it will show whoever whom we are concerned with through our own prayers. I believe in the power of prayer. So yes, there are actually circumstances and challenges in these people's lives, wherever they are, Myanmar, Kabul. But through prayer and through a genuine concern for their welfare, things can change and will change for the better. Don't ask me how. I always believe that a prayer from a sincere heart has the power to move mountains, and that's all I can say. That this is what I believe in strongly. That a prayer every day for the benefit of others will go a long way. So Khadija will be well, and our prayers go out to her family and all those friends of ours who are in Myanmar and other places of troubled minds right now. Mm-hmm. It is more like how should I say, a balm to their hearts. You may not even have to say a word. I used to work in as a volunteer in hospice, palliative care, as a volunteer when I was very much younger, and I don't even have to say a word. The families may come and visit them. I used to volunteer to just try to spend some time in silence, complete silence, with a smile, with a touch. And that gave so much of calmness to the person who was dying. They are not asking for much. In fact, no one is asking for much in life. Everyone just wants to have a connection, a heart-to-heart connection. That's it. That I'm here for you. Don't be afraid. In fact, that's basically all that life is all about. That here we are for each other. Mm-hmm. And I think the more we reach out to others, even a phone call like Mr. Elias has said, or even having to mentor someone through a course, a correspondence course, the universe knows what's its route for everyone's reconciliation. If there is pain, there will be a overriding opposite force to counter that pain. That's all I need to share. Thank you.
Thank you, Deepak. I'm just going to read out what one of our audience has said. Bindia from India. She said something which is very true. Sometimes we connect with unknown people through technology and develop a deep heart-to-heart connection without any judgment. For me, it has happened so many times this past 2 years because of the fact that I've also experienced lockdown. I'm in Malaysia right now. I can't really meet many people. But when I met with people online who have never met before, without any judgment, such a deep connection, which I found at times was more than what I had previously, in the face-to-face relationships, because of the distractions. There was so much distraction and busyness, I would say, and activity. So now it's sort of an isolated, and it's sort of, there's a more focus on the bond, but it's not, even though it is not physical. But relationships is not necessarily a physical, it's energy, right? I mean, I'm feeling the energy already with the people. I'm seeing you on screen, even though it's a small little box. I'm feeling your energy. I'm feeling the feed. I'm still in tears, by the way, trying to control it. But think about it, really. How many people have you met physically? I haven't met many people physically. The past 1 year, I have not. But I still feel the bond. I don't feel alone. So Dr. Kent mentioned one thing, I think it was yesterday, he said to me, Tahira, I wanted to talk about technology being a double-edged sword. It is. A double-edged, if it's the positive side and negative side. Without it, I don't know how we would have gone through this. But then with it, also people are going all out, and then they're losing their relationship because of technology. Kent, you have an example, right? You were saying something about your previous relationship was affected because of technology.
Well, yeah, my previous relationship was affected because of technology. My wife found a Facebook boyfriend and ran off with him. It wound up being a great thing for me, because I'm much happier now than I was then. I want to give a shout out to Kathleen Embry. She's one of my supervisors at American Intercontinental University. Thanks for being here, Kathleen. This whole business about relationships, I've been thinking about it in Jungian terms. Carl Jung, he's one of my intellectual heroes. He talks about dualities, that our life is a series of dualities which must be overcome through resolution. And one of our dualities, one of the most fundamental dualities that we have for relationships, is that we have this need to be this independent, able to stand on my own being. And yet at the same time, we must be connected with other people. The connection is the fundamental principle of the universe. If you think about it, subatomic particles have to connect to each other in order to create an atom. Atoms connect to each other in order to form molecules. Everything is compelled to connect. So this duality is a critical thing for us, that we're able to somehow maintain our autonomy, but at the same time we're able to touch other people and connect with other people.
And Mother Nature has the same story. Mother Nature has the same connectivity and independence at the same time, interdependence. The sea, mountains, rivers, the land we live on, the forest that we see, is all interdependent and independent in the same way. No tree is alike. No plant is alike. Every small creature is different, and they have a hierarchy, and at the same time they're all in harmony. So living independently is quite delusional, because no one is independent in a way that the nature says it so clearly. And we need to acknowledge this. I always say that pride comes before fall. What is all that? That's basically telling us that we have to be humble enough to acknowledge that our existence is not a standalone. Even a pyramid has got the number of sides to actually keep it upright. This is the same thing for all of us. We need to have to acknowledge first that there is actually others who are here before us and who are actually supporting us, and we need to support others as well. So gratitude to me is the first and foremost acknowledgement. Gratitude to yourself, because whatever you have done, of course you need to have self-love, but I think gratitude towards others is more important, and that gratitude comes as a result of acknowledgement first of their contribution in your lives and the values that they have put in your life. So gratitude is the beginning and the end of all relationships. So thank you.
So we have addressed a couple of things: reconciliation, connection, empathy, and gratitude, also compassion. So we're now in 2021, okay? And 2021, yeah. And I'll tell you this, there are groups of people there who believe that things may get worse in 2022. Let's hope not. Let's pray not, okay? And if things, I would not want lockdowns to continue, would like people to connect. It is raising up in certain countries. USA, I think there's some kind of freedom. But what do we need to do in order to preserve these relationships? Because people are losing their lives because of lack of connection. I mentioned this. In Malaysia, I had a shock. My goodness. Just in about 4 months, there were, I think, 500 or over suicides among teenagers, just teenagers. So we don't even know what the number's correct. Singapore doesn't publish suicide rates. Yeah. So teenagers are committing suicide. That's a really bad thing. So we need to protect the youth. How can what do we need to look at in terms of relationships to protect the youth, protect the elderly? As Kent has raised a very important thing about the elderly. They find it very hard. My mother's finding it very hard. She's in depression right now. She can't take it. Even though she's vaccinated, she can go to restaurants, she can meet, but she doesn't feel like meeting.
I think if I may just share that there is an absence of anchor in people's lives. The reason why I would say that people have gone ahead to do certain things like self-harm is that when you're defined by your work, when you're defined by so many other external things, and when this starts falling away, which is natural because sometimes it's man-made, sometimes it's nature-made. When you're defined by all these scaffolds around your life and they start falling away through nature or nurture by man, and there's a disruption, then your definition of who you are, starts becoming altogether lost. So I think one has to then start informing and raising the awareness of what actually are you here, what exactly should your anchor be, and you are the one to decide that, and I think unless we acknowledge that your definitions of life are not all this acquisitions that you have, none of these job definitions or even security for the matter, I think then you start really addressing the real issue. So that is what I think we need to do, is to raise the awareness to say, look, what exactly are the core issues in your life? What do you define yourself be?
Norani has something to say, right?
Yes. Well, I codified all the 3 words from what we have been speaking. One is of course the connection, and then what Deepak said about prayers, and the other one is about nature. So talking, and then the young and the elders, right? So talking about nature, a group of ladies, the elders, just now I was talking about Khadija, very young one in school, the elders, they formed a group called the Blue Sky. And the reason why they formed the blue sky, it's because they said when we felt hopeless, we look at the sky, we realize that we are all interconnected. Because the sky is like, the whole world is filled with sky. So they made this scarf, and I have so happened it's just next to me. Border, can you see? Oops.
Yes.
Border, and the other side is, let me see if I can have.
Your discipline.
Anyway,
okay.
It's border free, and it has the in its diary word, Bruin March. Maybe my pronunciation is not so correct. So anyway, so now, like you mentioned, sometimes we just can't connect. Like some of those that I've been contacting the last few days, talking about, route to go to the border, where the camps, certain camps are, and we just lose connection. So then the next connection in our relationship, that when we can't see with our own eyes, is truly depending whatever faith or religious background, but a person like me is, by prayers. And I do feel that is a hope that I hold on. Now, coming back to nature and talking about the youth in Malaysia, when we lost someone, or someone I use the word departure or passed on, we grieve. Recently, I lost some of my plants. I'm so connected. I have this deep relationship with my plants and the soil and the organism, and I do respect them as part of my life, because they nourish us all the veggies that I've been planting and all that. So when we talk about our self-perception on happiness, on success, today we have realized what have been imprinted in our mind has collapsed in many cases, whereby things that is accessible for everyone, that is not influenced by consumerism, is something that can actually nourish us. It's almost like going back to basics.
Yes.
Basics, And so in Malaysia, while people are distributing food, dry food, thousands of people are receiving dry food, we try to change narrative, especially with the support of refugee youth. And now we have Malaysians joining, where we actually distribute nursery plants. And that's one of the connection that we have, human to human, human and nature. And it is not expensive, and it just grow and your food scrap and all that. So coming back to the human relations, I think we can live in great abundance if we do remember that we are all equal and unique, and we can connect without being influenced by expectation of the world and consumerism, and that our nature, Mother Nature, has to be in peace so that human will also be in peace. I really appreciated the human, I call it carbon community. Yes, someone said, what? I said, yeah, carbon community. At the end, we're all, turn into soil and compost and back recycle. Only our soul, our spirit will be away from our body at this carbon, but the plants and we do see that that excites people. Of course, there's so many ways to excite people. Talking about technology, we can come in via Zoom. There's so many gamification and all that, but I think yesterday, Tahira, there was a discussion on human intelligence, correct? And we were discussing about our connection, the body, mind, and the spirit. And I think like for us to have a healthy relationship, connection with one another, we need to acknowledge also that part, our spirit, body, and mind, and how it interconnects with nature.
Deepak was saying something interesting before we started this panel. He says, ultimately, you will realize with all the panels, it'll come back to the same thing. Eventually, the message will be the same. I've realized this, the natural intelligence panel we had yesterday, then we had on co-creation, and of course, there were others also. I was not involved in moderating those, but the ones I was moderating, there's the same thing, self-awareness, transformation, discovering purpose, knowing who you are, all that together. and being anchored, knowing who you are is the anchoring. So no matter what the situation is, there's a term about being beyond resilience, anti-fragile. Yeah, when you are anchored, you're anti-fragile. You actually thrive. You thrive in the most difficult times. And I believe Elias has something to share on that, because he's got your book, right? Leading from the Stop is based on the time of 9/11. And
certainly is.
Yeah, you want to share a bit about that, about the
let me share a short story if I can. As you rightly said, Leading from the Stop was written about the experience that we had on 9/11. I was flying from London in the UK to Chicago in the USA on that fateful day, September 11, 2001, when our plane was one of 38 that was diverted to Gander International Airport. And literally in about 90 minutes, the town went from a population of 9,300 who woke up for breakfast to about 16,000 people who had to be there for supper. The question is, how do you cope as a community with a tragedy like 9/11 that completely stops your world in an instant? And we end up spending 24 hours on the aeroplane, on the tarmac, before they disembarked us. And then we spend another 40 minutes traveling to the Salvation Army in a small town called Gambo. And when I was at the Salvation Army, I ended up being there until about midnight on that first night in the Salvation Army. And in the back of my mind, all I wanted to do was to write a report. So at midnight, I went to the hall, which earlier on was full of people eating and joking and smiling and laughing. And then there's only two people, myself and an older lady, a grandmother, probably in her mid-60s. She had knitting needles in her hand and started to come up to me and started to talk, ask me questions like, are you married? Do you have children? And quite honestly, I was angry. I didn't want to be disrupted from my task. But it took me maybe 10 or 15 minutes before I realized all she wanted to do was to reach out to me. She was a member of the congregation. She was there at night at her own time to look after us. And as I understood, and I closed my laptop and I started to talk to her for probably another 45 minutes or an hour before I went off to bed, I learned 3 lessons. I think these are 3 important lessons for today as they were back then in 9/11. The first lesson is take control of yourself first. We've heard this mentioned on this panel already. When you're in a crisis, you have to be able to ask for help. And it's so important that we do this. We encourage people to ask for help. 20 years ago, when we had 9/11, there wasn't that much counseling available. There wasn't that much support available in our community. But today we have to realize that we have to look after ourselves first. Ask for help. There's no shame in asking for help. The second thing which we learned, and the principle is to build and expand your community. We've been talking about this, how important it is to have community. Look out for others. As a leader, whether you're leading a multinational or leading your family or yourself, you're still a leader, but you have to look out for others. And the third element is you have to change the rules, because a crisis like 9/11 meant everything changed overnight. Just think about this. The airline industry stopped. Tourism in New York City evaporated instantaneously. The conference I was going to and all conferences were canceled. Sorry, did I say 9/11? Because I could have said global financial crisis or COVID or Delta. It's the same, yet we managed to get through 9/11. We managed to get through the global financial crisis, and we will get through COVID and Delta. If I may, let me just read out a comment that was written in the foreword for my book by Mark Cole, who is the president and CEO of the John Maxwell Enterprise. He said, while the world struggled to comprehend the chaos of unspeakable terror, Elias gleaned incredible insights from the people around him who sought to bring order and comfort to the chaos. That's a pretty good definition of leadership, actually, bringing order and comfort out of chaos. It's a little old-fashioned, I suppose, but it's something people are missing from the leadership they experience these days. Maybe it's because leadership has shifted its focus from people to production. We're in such a hurry to get things done that we neglect the very people who accomplish the things we need done. I think that's what we have to come back and understand. It's the people who get things done. We have to reach out to people to encourage people and to grow people. And at the same time, that'll help us to grow ourselves.
I'd like to comment on that, people versus production. Essentially, the production orientation is management. The people orientation is leadership. We have a situation in today's economy where the stakeholder model of governance of organizations has given way to shareholder governance. Shareholder governance holds that we must maximize the financial payout to shareholders at whatever cost. And that's inimical to that people focus. The whole psychological contract of an organization is abrogated by this shift to a shareholder governance. I wrote a chapter in a book about this last year. It invalidates a whole lot of organizational psychology precepts and research, and we're going to be in a pretty bad situation as economies, as people, if this shareholder governance does not yield back to stakeholders. Stakeholders are everybody that's connected with the organization in any way. And this is about relationships, isn't it? You don't have a relationship with a supervisor or a boss under this shareholder governance, because their focus isn't on you. Their focus is on squeezing every bit of money they can out of the organization. And that's a conundrum for relationships. That means we must seek our relationships outside of the work environment. And the paradox of all this is that intrinsically motivated people are way more productive, way more loyal to the organization than the people who are being having their jobs outsourced or working without any kind of meaningful compensation. So many people now have to work 2 or 3 jobs just to make ends meet because of this shareholder governance model that has taken over corporate, not just America, but the corporate world.
Kent, you're so correct. And as you were saying that, I just wrote down the little note, and it says that babies cry for this, old men die for this. This is recognition. People want to be recognized. People want to be acknowledged. People want to know that they're wanted and needed. And we have to reverse the trend. We have to be brave enough to turn around and think of people and treat people not like an asset, but like a human. And this is now our responsibility in this generation to reestablish this. If we go back and we think of an earlier conversation, the two-edged sword of technology. Technology has been ripping our youth away from us. Tahira's been talking about the mass self-harming and suicide that's going on, especially in the younger generation. You have technology like Facebook, for example, which when it was originally launched, had a very good purpose. But now with artificial intelligence, whether you're on YouTube or Facebook or something else, it will automatically feed more material to you to keep you engaged for longer. That's how they monetize their platform. And what happens is you get sucked down this rabbit hole of a pathway where you are being guided by your thinking to one side or another. It is very polar. Oh, absolutely. Polarizing is the exact word, Kent, I was thinking of. So what can we now do to encourage people? I know programs like The Social Dilemma came out on Netflix recently, and these were the executives who were some of the founding fathers of Twitter and YouTube and Google and Facebook and other platforms telling us about how dangerous they can be. But what are we going to do? Because when I look at the combined wisdom on this panel, there are a lot of people with a lot of life experiences. How do we translate that for those who are coming behind us, who don't have the same life experiences that we had? And I think of a phrase that I heard many years ago. It's what your grandmother knew, but your mother forgot to tell you. Maybe we should resurface grandma's words and help the next generation to learn.
Yes.
The next generation is growing up in a different context than we did. And they have a compulsion as a group to construct their own reality, the social construction of reality, if you would. That generation of people that we think we're out of touch with, we are out of touch with. And the reason that we're out of touch with them is that they have an entirely different worldview and an entirely different reality than we have.
Okay, thank you. You know, what you raised, Elias, is actually the purpose of this panel, is really we have all this wisdom and it needs to be used. It needs to be quantified, right? There are millions out there who would not know what to do. And also some policies, this is just my opinion, which are in place, which take away the humanness, which take away the connectedness that we need, which are probably not implemented correctly. They have a certain intention, but it was set up in such a way that it is actually resulting in more harm because relationships are being affected. There's also another point which you mentioned about that connectedness. It is being so affected and broken down, you know, this past 2 years, that our lifestyle, our life right now, it's a totally different life. I don't know how it is in your country, but it is a totally different life. And how we build relationships is also quite different. We have to rethink how to build relationships and how to work on relationships. You know, people don't want to meet. It's like this in Asia. I don't know about New Zealand. It's a fear. Fear has ruled people's lives to another level. So now we need to build on relationships. We have to work out a strategy on relationships based on everything that's happening around us. So people can rise above all this and still build up strength and strong and deep relationships. And so
I think all the points that Dr. Kent and Mr. Elias raised are valid. But as the thing about us as human beings is that we are able to rise above and raise awareness. Animals don't have that ability. So if we have triumphed in the past, it is because of the fact that there were those who were able to raise themselves first, see everything from a kaleidoscope, a higher helicopter view, and then be able to guide the others to say, this is the way, let's go with this. So unless you want to acknowledge that you cannot rise above this, you can't do anything more. So you must be able to say there is a way out. That's what hope means. There is actually a way out. There is this dust that is there, but let's find a way out. The approach towards this whole problems are based on our fears. What can go wrong? What have I done in the past? I think this is not working. Fine, but now we have to work on faith. You got to work on faith. You got to work on the positivity of, can there be a solution? Let's find a solution. Let's work on what can be done, as opposed to the victim mentality, or look at me, look at what has happened. I've lost my job. I've lost my loved one. What is going to be happening next? There's a lot of fear-based. So any relationship that's fear-based, that's based on insecurity and whatnot, I think you need to change that slowly by giving them a certain amount of hope that there can be a better day tomorrow, and let's work on that positive message. So there's a lot of doom and gloom and fear right now wherever we go. But if you are going to make a change in their lives, and you need to start emitting that, you have to be that person who has to believe that good things can happen, and you lead the way in that way.
Yes.
So
back
that's
again.
essential.
So
That fear comes from a sense of separateness. It's a mind virus of being apart, alone. And it goes back to that basic duality that I was speaking of earlier, independence versus connection. We have this thing called ego that is essentially the defender of our self as a separate, apart from everyone being. And that ego will prevent us from making those connections. So what we have to do is we have to surrender that ego. We have to surrender the defense of ourselves as this autonomous separate being, and we have to just give that up. When we surrender our egos, we make those egos unassailable. We no longer have to defend them. And when we no longer have to defend those egos, then we're able to take those meaningful risks of connection with other people.
So again, we come back to the same point again. Self-awareness, spirituality.
Yes.
And trust. You got to have trust.
Faith and hope. It all comes together on all this. And so, which means that education is key on these values, these, instead of the standard education, but these things, this kind of education for the youth, and is key. That's what it is, ultimately. Nurani, you want to say something? Can't hear you.
Talking about education for you, that's what I am passionate about. And coming back to what Elias just said, what our grandmother did that our mom forgot to tell you or us. Thank you. That's really sweet. And it sounds so simple, but it's so significant. And that reminded me of one gathering I went in the United States many years ago by Islamic Society of North America. A friend of mine invited, so it was very interesting. 30,000 people came. And in one of the interfaith forum, there was a rabbi, a pastor, and an imam. And they shared that they have been working together to engage the communities, and they meet and they discuss. So they connect and they converse, meet and discuss. Then they told us, the audience, please do not follow us. I thought, why? That's a great thing. You connect and you converse. That's a great thing. They said, that's not enough. You have to do something together. And they shared that we have done this for the last 20 years. And until the day that we actually did something together, then we realized the humanity of our dear friends, because we go beyond. We will see our weaknesses beyond the, sitting on the stage. We see the weaknesses, the strength, and that journey build the relationship and it brings deeper. So, for young people, I met so many of them from the region. And I always see that they really are excited to do something. And I do feel that, as an educator and an activist, I have a responsibility to be the mother, though I have no children, I have no child. I'm single, and my life is for all these young people. So I do hope that I will be the mother that coach them, mentor them, and walk with them. And this is like their heart cry. Even I remember when I was doing my master's in the USA some years ago, there was a writing that I read about the spiritual desire that the students were asking high learning institutions to integrate anything in their education component that will enrich their spiritual life, not just religiosity, but spirituality. So I think there is this longing heart in the young people to do something good. And we, as the adult, not just have to bring them to or create an avenue to connect and converse, but to do something together. And I think we will never discover the greatness of someone who's just next to us until we toil together, we cry together, we laugh together. And that's what the relationship is about. And it's not just one day thing. It's not a program. It is a lifetime love relationship. It goes beyond.
Doing something together. That's another,
Yes.
That is what's going to seal the bonds for life.
Yeah. So we use these 3 C's. After learning from them, I met a few other youth leaders, and then we said that let's try to work on these 3 C's: to connect, converse, and contribute.
And that is what we are going to do also. Connect, converse, and
contribute. Yes,
together.
I may want to add one more C, care.
Awesome. There's a 4C, yes.
Yes, definitely. Yeah.
But there has to be care, compassion, right?
Compassion, yes. And all that, it has to be integrated. When we connect, there must be care.
So we move away from the Singapore 4Cs. Elias and Kent, there is a Singapore 4Cs. What's it called? Car, condominium.
I've never heard of that.
Credit card, and I think country club membership.
Country club membership, that's gone.
Actually, that's very interesting. When Singapore celebrated the 50 years anniversary of Singapore, I was invited to join one of these 40 emerging leaders, or whatever they call it. So we were there to think about Singapore 100. Yeah, so there's a small think tank to express our aspiration for Singapore 100. And one of the things that we discussed was redefining happiness.
Great. Okay. So I think we can come to a close. We've gone to another level. And just want to announce that we have a few more panels today. One on thriving using your voice, another one on post-COVID future for children, very, very important. I think it's a lead on to this. Then writing, are we free to write? Writing freedom, where should it go next? Dr. Kirpal, Chief Judge, is the chair for that. Please come and be part of the audience. And then in the evening, which is Kent, your morning, is the networking. We're going to have breakout rooms. We're going to all the speakers and also the audience will interact. That's at 8:30 p.m. Singapore time, which is 8:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Late for you, Elias. But if you can join in for the first half an hour, it'd be great. It's all networking. Okay, we've been speaking. People have been listening. And now is to get to know and do something together. Okay. So thank you.
I just have one last quote to share.
Share.
When a flashlight grows dim or quits working, do you just throw it away? Or do you change the batteries? When a person messes up or finds themselves in a dark place, do you cast them aside? Or do you help them change their batteries? Some need AA size batteries, attention and affection. Some need AAA, attention, affection, and acceptance. Some need C, compassion. Some need D, direction. And if they still don't seem to shine, you need to sit with them quietly and share your light. You need to sit with them quietly and share your light. I think based on what the others have actually explained, especially Noraini, all this youth and others, in fact, even the older ones, the elders in our community, we need to make time for them. I think the problem here is that we are too rushing with our own problems. We need to make time for everyone whom we can reach out to. So time is something that comes out from your own schedule, and you need to make time for others as well as for yourself.
Okay.
If any relationship is going to be of any success.
Okay.
That's all.
Thank you very much. So maybe 2-3 words, like from each panelist, of what you felt you gained, or your message to the audience in 2-3 words or 5 words.
I just want to say, Tahira, that it's always a pleasure to work with you, and you have done some amazing things pulling this together. Deep respect and love.
I want to thank you for always being there. I've never met you, and I think we have a virtual friendship for how long? I don't remember. 7 years, 6 years? I really lost count.
I don't even know how we came across each other.
I don't even know how that happened, seriously.
The universe
But
dictated.
we have written books together. You've edited the book also. You've been part of panels. You've been part of videos. I really, I don't know how all this happened. But this is I think openness, open heart from both sides. Heart connection. Thank you very much. And thank you all also. I hope that we will also have an open heart connection this day with the audience also. Share your light.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you so much. Good day. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.